Faith Young woke up at 5:45 a.m., the way she always did. No alarm. Her body just knew. 15 years of early mornings had trained her better than any clock ever could. She made coffee in the dark kitchen, black, no sugar. The spoon clinked against the mug while the house was still quiet. Her husband, Terence Hall, was asleep upstairs. He was a civil rights attorney, the kind of man who read case files the way other people read novels. They'd been married 11 years. Solid. Comfortable. The kind of love that doesn't need grand gestures, because the small ones never stopped. Faith stood by the window, watching the street lights flicker off one by one as dawn crept in. She lived in a modest house in the state capital, nothing flashy, a brick two-story with a patch of lawn and a fence that needed painting. You'd never guess what she did for a living by looking at where she lived. And that was the point. Faith Young was the Deputy Inspector General for the state's Office of Police Accountability. Her job, her entire career, was investigating cops who broke the law. Excessive force, racial profiling, evidence tampering, theft under the badge. She'd seen it all. She'd built cases that ended careers and sent officers to prison. But she never talked about it at dinner parties, never introduced herself with a title. She drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper. She kept her badge in her work bag, not on her belt. If you passed her on the street, you'd see a black woman in her early 40s with tired eyes and a calm voice. Nothing more. That's what made her dangerous. Not the title, the invisibility. She got to the office by 7. The building was government gray, 3 floors, bad lighting. Her desk sat behind a glass door with her name on it, in small letters. No window. She liked it that way. Fewer distractions. That Tuesday was routine. She spent the morning reviewing a misconduct case that had taken 8 months to close. An officer in a southern district had been falsifying overtime reports. Not glamorous, not headline-worthy, but it mattered. Every case mattered, because every case was someone's trust broken. By 5 p.m., she was done. She packed her laptop into her work bag, grabbed the envelope from her desk drawer, $300 cash for her mother's birthday, and headed for the parking lot. She called Terence from the car, put him on speaker as she merged onto the highway. "I'm taking Route 9 home. Gonna swing by Mom's tomorrow with the gift. Tell Tanya I said happy birthday." "I will." "And Faith, don't speed through that county. You know how those roads are." She smiled. Terence always said that, every time she took that route. It was a joke between them, but it wasn't really a joke. They both knew what that stretch of highway was famous for. Black drivers getting stopped for no reason. Stories that floated through church groups and barbershops like smoke. She'd heard the rumors for years. A deputy out there who targeted black motorists, who took their money and called it legal, who planted things in cars and dared anyone to prove otherwise. But rumors weren't cases, and Faith didn't work on rumors. Not yet. The sun dropped low as she turned onto the 2-lane county road. Fields stretched flat on both sides. No buildings, no gas stations, just asphalt and sky and the hum of her engine. The kind of road where you could drive 15 minutes without seeing another car. The kind of road where anything could happen and no one would know. Her dashcam, a small personal unit clipped behind the rearview mirror, blinked its tiny red light. Always recording. A habit she'd picked up years ago, back when her mother Tanya told her the story that changed everything. Tanya Young had been pulled over on a road just like this one, 22 years ago. An officer dumped her purse on the asphalt, called her names she never repeated. took $40 from her wallet, and told her to be grateful he didn't arrest her. She filed a complaint. Nothing happened. Not a letter, not a phone call, nothing. That was the day Faith decided what she would do with her life. She was thinking about her mother when she saw the blue lights flash behind her. The blue lights hit her rearview mirror like a slap. Faith's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Just for a second. Then she loosened them, breathed in through her nose, breathed out through her mouth. She'd taught herself this, the way her mother taught her to place both hands at 10 and 2 whenever she saw a patrol car, the way every black parent in America teaches their children to survive a traffic stop. Don't reach for anything. Don't raise your voice. Don't give them a reason. She signaled right, eased onto the gravel shoulder. Dust kicked up behind the Civic and drifted through the last golden light of the evening. She put the car in park, killed the engine, placed both hands on top of the steering wheel where they could be seen. The cruiser sat behind her for almost 2 minutes, just sitting there, lights spinning. No movement. This was part of it. She knew that. The waiting. Letting the driver marinate in fear. Letting the power gap sink in before a single word was spoken. She glanced at her rearview mirror. 2 figures in the cruiser. Driver's side door finally opened. Deputy Dale Braddock stepped out. He was a big man. Not tall. Wide. Thick neck, thick forearms, belt loaded with enough gear to make him jingle when he walked. Late 40s, sunburned face, wraparound sunglasses pushed up on his forehead even though the sun was almost gone. He walked toward her car, slowly, not a hurry in the world. His boots crunched on the gravel with each step. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound of a man who believed he owned every inch of road he stood on. His partner, Officer Scott Hensley, stayed by the cruiser. Younger, early 30s, lean face, clean uniform. He leaned against the hood with his arms crossed, watching, but not approaching. He looked like a man who had learned long ago that his job was to stand there and say nothing. Braddock reached Faith's window. He didn't lean down to speak. He stood straight, looking down at her, flashlight on, even though there was still enough daylight to see. He aimed the beam directly into her eyes. License and registration. No greeting, no introduction, no name, no badge number, no explanation for the stop. Faith squinted against the light. Good evening, officer. May I ask why I've been pulled over? He didn't answer, just held the light on her face, studying her, the way a butcher studies a cut of meat. I said, license and registration. You got a hearing problem? Faith reached slowly for her glove compartment. She narrated every movement out loud, the way she'd been trained, the way every black driver in America learns to narrate. I'm reaching into my glove compartment for my registration. My license is in my purse on the passenger seat. She handed both documents through the window. He took them without looking at them, held them loosely in his left hand while the flashlight stayed fixed on her with the right. Where you coming from? The state capital. That's a long way. What brings you down here? I'm driving home. I take this route sometimes. This route. He repeated the words like they were evidence of something. You take this route. Through my county. He said, my county, the way a landlord says, my property. Ownership. Territory. Lines drawn that people like her weren't supposed to cross. He walked to the front of her car, looked at the plates, walked back, slowly, taking his time, letting her sit. These plates current? Yes, sir. Insurance? In the glove compartment. I can get it. Stay in the car. He walked back to his cruiser, sat inside for another 3 minutes, running her plates, she assumed, or pretending to. The lights kept spinning, painting the fields red and blue. Faith sat still. Her heart rate was elevated. She could feel it in her temples. But her face was stone. She'd interviewed officers who had done exactly this. She'd read hundreds of complaints that described exactly this sequence: the pointless delay, the refusal to state a reason, the flashlight as intimidation, the tone designed to remind you that out here, on this road, your rights were whatever he decided they were. But knowing what was happening didn't make it feel any less suffocating. Braddock came back. This time his voice had shifted, harder, flatter. A decision had been made behind those sunglasses. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, can you tell me the reason for this stop? I'm not going to ask you twice. Step out. I have a right to know why. You smell that? He turned to Hensley, who had drifted closer. Hensley, you smell that? Hensley hesitated. I'm not sure. Marijuana. Clear as day. Braddock turned back to Faith. I'm detecting the odor of marijuana coming from your vehicle. Step out. Now. There was no marijuana. There had never been marijuana. Faith didn't smoke. The car smelled like coffee and leather cleaner. But it didn't matter. The fabricated smell was the key that unlocked every door. Probable cause, manufactured in 3 words. Faith unfastened her seatbelt, opened the door slowly, stepped out onto the gravel. Loose stones shifted under her flats. The evening air was warm and heavy, thick with the smell of cut grass from the fields. She stood by her car. Braddock positioned himself between her and the driver's door. Hensley moved to the passenger side. Braddock looked at her the way he looked at all of them, not as a person, as a transaction. Hands on the hood. I don't consent to a search, officer. The words came out clear and practiced. She said them the way a lawyer would, because she knew those words mattered. Not on this road, not tonight, but later. In a report, in a courtroom, on a recording. Braddock smiled. Not a real smile, the kind that says, your words mean nothing here. Hands on the hood. She placed her palms flat on the warm metal. The engine heat pressed into her skin. She could feel the vibration of the cooling block beneath her fingers. Braddock nodded to Hensley. Check the car. Hensley opened the passenger door, started with the glove compartment. Papers shuffled. Then the center console. Then the back seat. The sound of her belongings being handled by a stranger. Fabric sliding, zippers opening, things being moved, filled the silence. Faith stared straight ahead, at the empty road, at the fields turning dark, at the sky going purple at the edges. Braddock stood behind her, close, too close. She could smell his aftershave, cheap and sharp. She could hear him breathing. You know what I think? He said, low enough that only she could hear. I think you people drive through here thinking nobody's watching, thinking you can carry whatever you want, thinking the rules don't apply. She said nothing. But see, this is my stretch. Has been for 10 years, and I always find what I'm looking for. She noted the words, my stretch, 10 years, always find. She filed them the way she filed evidence, clean, precise, ready to be used. Hensley's voice came from inside the car. Got an envelope here, cash. Braddock's eyes lit up. He walked to the passenger side, took the envelope from Hensley, opened it slowly, deliberately, making sure Faith could see. He counted the bills. $300. Each one held up to the fading light like he was inspecting it for authenticity. $300. He whistled low. That's a lot of cash to be carrying around. Where'd this come from? It's a birthday gift. From my mother. A birthday gift? He tucked the envelope into his vest pocket, patted it twice. Well, your mother's gonna have to wait. This is suspected drug proceeds, civil asset forfeiture, county policy. That's not drug money, and you know it. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the veins in his neck. What I know is that I detected marijuana in your vehicle, and now I've found a suspicious amount of cash. What I know is that you're on my road in my county, and the only thing between you and a cell right now is my good mood. So I suggest you shut your mouth, get back in your car, and drive. He reached into his shirt pocket, pulled out a folded seizure receipt, filled it out against the roof of her car, misspelled her last name deliberately, handed it to her without looking at her face. There's your paperwork. Now get out of my county. But Braddock wasn't done. He stood there, watching her fold the seizure receipt with trembling fingers she refused to let him see. Something in her stillness bothered him. Most people he stopped were shaking by now, crying, begging, promising to never drive this road again. Faith wasn't doing any of that, and it made him angry. Hold on, he raised one hand. I'm not finished with you yet. Faith stopped, one hand on her car door. You said I could go. I changed my mind. He tilted his head, the way a dog tilts its head before it bites. See, something about you isn't right. The way you're talking, the way you're standing there all calm like you got nothing to hide. In my experience, that means you got everything to hide. He turned to Hensley. Search the trunk. I already told you I do not consent to a search. And I already told you I don't care. Hensley popped the trunk. The hydraulic hinge groaned. Inside was Faith's work bag, a laptop, a change of shoes, a bottle of water, a folded umbrella. Nothing else. Braddock walked to the trunk and started pulling things out. Not searching, dumping. He grabbed the work bag and turned it upside down. Her laptop hit the trunk floor with a crack. Papers scattered across the gravel. A pen rolled under the car. Her reading glasses case bounced once and landed in the dirt. He picked up the laptop, turned it over in his hands. Nice computer. Real nice. How do you afford this on... What do you do again? I work for the state. The state? He said it like a punchline. Doing what? Cleaning floors? He dropped the laptop back into the trunk. Didn't place it. Dropped it. The sound, plastic on metal, made Faith's jaw tighten, but she didn't move. Hensley stood off to the side. He hadn't said a word in minutes. His hands were in his pockets. His eyes kept drifting to the road, then back to Braddock, then to the road again. The look on his face wasn't guilt. Not yet. It was the look of someone calculating how much trouble he could get into versus how much trouble Braddock could cause him if he spoke up. He chose silence. He always chose silence. Braddock reached into the trunk again, felt along the carpet lining, ran his fingers under the spare tire cover. Found nothing. Of course he found nothing. There was nothing to find. But that had never stopped him before. He reached into his own pocket, casually, the way you'd reach for a piece of gum, and he pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was a residue, brownish, powdery, barely enough to see. He held it up between two fingers. Well, well, look what we got here. Faith saw it. She saw exactly what he did. She saw him reach into his own pocket. She saw the bag come out of his vest, not out of her car. She saw the whole thing, and she understood it instantly. He planted it, right in front of her, like it was nothing, like it was routine. Because for him, it was. Hensley, bag this. We got drug residue in the suspect's vehicle. Hensley hesitated. Just a half second. His hand stayed at his side. Then he reached for the evidence bag on his belt and took the plastic bag from Braddock without looking at Faith. "That's not mine," Faith said. "They all say that. That came out of your pocket. I watched you." Braddock stepped toward her. Not fast, slow, deliberate. He stopped 6 inches from her face. She could smell the coffee on his breath, could see a piece of tobacco caught between his front teeth. "You want to say that again?" His voice dropped, quiet, almost a whisper, the kind of quiet that comes right before something breaks. "Because right now, you're looking at possession. But if you keep running your mouth, I can make it distribution. And distribution on a county highway, that's a felony. That's handcuffs. That's your car impounded. That's your name in the system." He let the words hang. "Or," he took one step back, "you can take your little receipt, get in your car, forget this ever happened, and never drive through my county again. Your choice." The evening was fully dark now. The cruiser's lights were the only illumination, blue and red washing over the fields in slow, rhythmic pulses. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Then silence. Just the crackle of Braddock's radio and the ticking of Faith's cooling engine. Faith looked at the ground, at her papers scattered in the gravel, at her glasses case covered in dirt, at the laptop she'd have to check for cracks later, at the receipt in her hand with her name misspelled on purpose. She looked at all of it, and then she looked at Braddock. "Can I pick up my belongings?" He waved a hand, dismissive, like shooing away a fly. She knelt on the gravel, small stones pressed into her knees through her work pants. She gathered the papers one by one, picked up her glasses case, brushed the dirt off with her thumb, put them back in her bag, placed the bag in the trunk, closed it. She walked to the driver's side door, opened it, sat down, put on her seatbelt. And then, one final gesture, the kind that stays with you. Braddock walked to her window. He pulled her driver's license from his shirt pocket. He didn't hand it to her. He held it out over the edge of the window and let it drop. It fell onto the asphalt beside her car. "Oops." She opened the door, bent down, picked it up off the ground. Gravel dust on the photo. Her own face staring back at her, smudged. She got back in the car, closed the door, started the engine. Braddock tapped the roof twice with his palm, the way you'd tap a horse on the side. "Move along. Get going. You're done." She pulled onto the road. In her rearview mirror, she could see Braddock walking back to his cruiser, laughing, saying something to Hensley that made him look away. She drove exactly the speed limit, both hands on the wheel, eyes forward. But behind the rearview mirror, a tiny red light blinked steadily. The dash cam had captured everything. Every word, every gesture, the planted evidence pulled from his pocket, the cash taken from her console, the license dropped on the ground, the misspelled receipt. All of it. Every second. She drove for 3 miles in silence. Then she pulled onto a side road, parked under a tree where the branches blocked out the stars. She turned off the engine, put her hands in her lap. And for the first time that night, Faith Young allowed herself to shake. Not from fear, from rage. The kind of rage that doesn't scream. The kind that sits in your chest and waits. The kind that builds a case. She picked up her phone, dialed a number she knew by heart. A voice picked up on the second ring. "Office of Police Accountability, after hours line." "This is Deputy Inspector General Faith Young. Badge number 3184. I need to file a formal complaint, and I need to initiate an official investigation. Immediately. Oh, hell no. No, I'm sorry. Just imagine that's you. You're on your knees picking up your own stuff off the ground, while this man stands over you, laughing. And he just planted drugs in your car. How would you feel? What would you do? The call lasted 11 minutes. Faith didn't raise her voice once. She didn't need to. She spoke the way she always spoke when she was building a case. Measured, precise, every word carrying weight. She gave the after-hours operator her badge number, the exact location of the stop, the time, the deputy's name and badge number she'd memorized from his chest plate. She described every violation in order. The stop without stated cause, the fabricated marijuana odor, the illegal search without consent, the theft of $300 under false pretense of civil forfeiture, the planted evidence, pulled from the deputy's own pocket, the threat of felony charges to ensure silence, the deliberately misspelled seizure receipt. The driver's license dropped on the ground. Then she said the words that set everything in motion. I'm also submitting dashcam footage. It captured the entire encounter, audio and video, start to finish. Silence on the other end, then a long exhale. Understood, ma'am. I'll flag this for priority review first thing tomorrow morning. No, not tomorrow, tonight. I want Detective Raymond Cole assigned, and I want a full records pull on Deputy Dale Braddock. Every traffic stop, every seizure receipt, every complaint filed against him in the last 10 years. All of it, on my desk by morning. She hung up, sat in the dark for another minute. Then she drove home. Terrence was waiting at the kitchen table when she walked in. He saw her face and didn't ask what happened. He just poured her a glass of water and sat across from her while she talked. She told him everything, every detail. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, his jaw was tight. His hands were flat on the table. How many others? He asked. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. By 7 a.m. the next morning, Faith was at her desk. Detective Raymond Cole was already there, a 15-year internal affairs veteran with a reputation for being thorough and impossible to pressure. He had the records pull waiting. What they found made Faith's stomach turn. Dale Braddock had conducted over 600 traffic stops in the last decade on that same stretch of highway. 600. The data pattern was unmistakable. Over 80% of the drivers stopped were black. In a county where black residents made up 12% of the population. Civil forfeiture receipts tied to his stops totaled over $400,000. 400,000. Exposed across hundreds of transactions, all following the same script. Marijuana odor, illegal search, cash seized, no drugs ever actually found, no arrests ever actually made, just money taken and people sent on their way. And the complaints. There were dozens, filed by drivers who found the courage to walk into a county office and put their name on paper. Every single one had been received by Captain Elaine Crawford. Every single one had been marked reviewed, no action warranted, and filed away. Not investigated, not forwarded, not questioned, just buried. Cole pulled up the individual complaints on his screen. Faith read them one by one. The language was different. Different people, different days, different years. But the story was always the same. He said he smelled marijuana, There was no marijuana. He took the money from my glove compartment and put it in his pocket. He told me if I filed a complaint, he'd make sure I got arrested next time. Nobody called me back. Nobody ever called me back. One name appeared 3 times across 2 years. Darnell Wilkins, a truck driver who had been stopped twice by Braddock and robbed both times. Total taken? $2,000. Money that was meant for his daughter's college tuition. He had filed complaints after each stop. Both were dismissed by Crawford. Cole called Wilkins that afternoon. When he told him that someone was finally investigating, Wilkins went quiet for a long time. Then his voice cracked. I thought nobody cared. I thought nobody was ever going to do anything. We're doing something now, Cole said. Within 48 hours, Faith's team had identified 31 victims willing to speak on record. 31 people with the same story, the same road, the same deputy, the same script. And now, the same dashcam footage that showed exactly how the script worked. Faith sent the case file to the county prosecutor and the FBI's Civil Rights Division simultaneously. She wasn't taking chances. This wasn't going to be handled locally, where Crawford's connections could slow things down. This was going federal. Meanwhile, Braddock was still on the road, still running stops, still fishing. He had no idea that a warrant with his name on it was already being signed. It happened on a Thursday morning. Sunny. Clear sky. The kind of day where nothing bad is supposed to happen. Braddock was sitting in his cruiser at his usual spot. Same stretch of highway, same speed trap, coffee in the cup holder, radar gun on the dash. Hensley in the passenger seat scrolling through his phone. A black SUV pulled up behind them, then another, then a county sedan. Braddock looked in his mirror, frowned. Detective Raymond Cole stepped out of the first SUV. 2 federal agents stepped out of the second. They walked toward the cruiser in a straight line. No hurry, no hesitation. Cole tapped on Braddock's window. Deputy Braddock, step out of the vehicle, please. Braddock's face shifted. Not fear, not yet. Confusion. The kind of confusion that comes when the world stops following the rules you made up for it. What's this about? Step out of the vehicle. He stepped out. Hensley stayed frozen in the passenger seat, phone still in his hand, screen gone dark. Cole handed Braddock a folded document. This is a warrant for your arrest. Charges include theft under color of law, civil rights violations, evidence tampering, filing false reports, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Braddock didn't open the document. He stared at Cole like the words were in a language he didn't speak. This is a mistake. I've been on this force for 16 years. We know. Cole nodded to one of the federal agents, who stepped forward with handcuffs. Turn around, deputy. Now hold on, hold on. Who filed this? Who? Turn around. The handcuffs clicked. The sound carried across the empty highway like a crack of thunder on a clear day. They drove Braddock to the county station, put him in the same interview room where he'd spent years writing up fabricated reports on the people he robbed. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Cole sat across from him, placed a laptop on the table, pressed play. The dashcam footage rolled. Faith's dashboard, Braddock's voice, the flashlight, the insults, the planted evidence coming out of his own pocket, the cash disappearing into his vest, the license dropped on the ground. Every second of it. Braddock watched himself on screen. The color drained from his face the way water drains from a sink. Slow at first, then all at once. He cycled through every response Faith had predicted he would. Denial first. That's not what happened. That footage is edited. Then minimization. This is standard procedure. Every officer does this. Then blame. She was acting suspicious. I had probable cause. Then, the bargaining. Listen, I've given 16 years to this department. 16 years. You're going to throw all that away over one stop? Not one stop, Cole said. 612 stops, 31 victims on record, $400,000 in fraudulent seizures, and one very clear video of you planting evidence. Braddock's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His badge was removed from his belt. His service weapon was taken from his holster. He was processed, photographed, and placed in a holding cell. That same afternoon, Captain Elaine Crawford was called into the chief's office. When she walked in, 2 investigators from the State Oversight Board were waiting. They had her emails, the ones where she acknowledged receiving complaints about Braddock, and responded with 2 words: file it. She tried to distance herself. I followed department protocol. Every complaint was reviewed and every complaint was buried, Captain, and you knew exactly what he was doing. Crawford was suspended pending investigation. Her office was sealed. Her computer was seized. Hensley was pulled from duty the same day. He sat in a separate interview room, pale and sweating. When Cole asked if he wanted to cooperate, Hensley didn't hesitate. "I'll tell you everything." He did. Every stop he witnessed. Every time Braddock reached into his own pocket. Every time he stood by and said nothing. He confirmed the entire operation, names, dates, locations, amounts, in exchange for reduced charges. By Friday evening, the dashcam footage was on every locast was the same. A still frame of Braddock dropping Faith's license on the ground. Dozens of times, screenshot after screenshot. The face of a man who thought he was untouchable, captured in the moment he proved he was anything but. The story didn't end with handcuffs. It was just getting started. Within a week, the FBI opened a full federal civil rights investigation, not just into Braddock, into the entire department, into the system that let him operate for a decade without consequence, into every hand that signed off on a complaint and did nothing. Federal investigators arrived in the county with boxes of subpoenas and a team of data analysts. They pulled every traffic stop record from the last 10 years, every seizure receipt, every dashcam log, or in Braddock's case, every missing dashcam log, every body camera report marked malfunctioning, every complaint filed and ignored. The pattern wasn't subtle. It was a blueprint. Braddock had averaged 60 stops per year on the same 15-mile stretch. 83% of those stops involved black drivers. The county's black population was 12%. The numbers didn't just suggest racial targeting. They screamed it. And the money. $412,000 in civil asset forfeiture over 10 years. Not $1 ever led to a drug charge. Not 1 gram of actual narcotics was ever logged into evidence from any of Braddock's stops. He seized cash, filed a receipt, and the money vanished into the county's general fund, with a percentage kicked back to the department as an operational bonus. It was theft. Organized, systematic, decade-long theft. And everyone above Braddock had benefited from it. The trial began on a Monday in October. Federal courthouse. Judge Patricia Stanton presiding. The courtroom was packed. Local press in the front rows, national media in the back. Camera crews lining the hallway outside. Faith Young sat 3 rows behind the prosecution table. She wore the same blazer she'd worn the night of the stop. She didn't speak to reporters. She didn't need to. The prosecution's case was built on 3 pillars: the dashcam footage, the data analysis, and the victims. They played the footage first. Every screen in the courtroom lit up with the same image. Faith's dashboard, the flashing lights, Braddock's voice cutting through the speakers. The jury watched him yank her door open, watched him dump her belongings on the gravel, watched him reach into his own pocket and pull out the planted evidence, watched him fan her $300 and slide them into his vest. 12 jurors, 12 faces. Not one of them looked away. Then came the data. A forensic analyst walked the jury through the numbers on a projected screen. Stop rates by race, seizure amounts by year, complaint counts by quarter. The analyst used a single phrase that landed like a hammer. This was not random policing. This was a targeted revenue operation. Then the victims. Darnell Wilkins took the stand on a Wednesday afternoon. He wore a pressed white shirt, and his hand shook the entire time. He told the jury about the first stop, a Tuesday evening in March, 3 years ago. He was driving home from a long-haul route. Braddock pulled him over, said he smelled marijuana, searched the truck, found $800 in the center console, cash Wilkins had earned that week. Braddock took it, wrote a receipt, told him to drive. Wilkins filed a complaint. Nothing happened. 4 months later, Braddock stopped him again. Same road, same script. This time, he took $1,200. Wilkins filed another complaint. Again, nothing. That money was for my daughter, Wilkins said. His voice cracked on the word daughter. She had a tuition payment due. I had to call the school and tell them I couldn't pay. I had to listen to my own child ask me why. And I didn't have an answer. Because how do you explain to your kid that a police officer robbed you and nobody cares? The courtroom was silent. A juror in the back row wiped her eyes. 6 more victims testified over the following days. A nurse who lost $500 on her way to a night shift. A retired teacher who had $300 taken. Grocery money for the month. A college student who was stopped twice in 1 week and had his car searched both times. Same road, same deputy, same lies, same silence afterward. Braddock's defense attorney tried everything. He argued department culture, that Braddock was trained to conduct aggressive stops, and that civil forfeiture was legal under county policy. He argued training gaps, that Braddock was never told his methods were improper. He even attempted to discredit the dashcam footage, claiming the angle was misleading and the audio was unclear. Judge Stanton shut that down in 4 words. The footage speaks clearly. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They came back on a Friday. Guilty. Every single count. Theft under color of law, civil rights violations, evidence tampering, filing false reports, conspiracy. Braddock stood when the verdict was read. His legs buckled slightly. He grabbed the edge of the defense table. For the first time in the entire trial, he looked like what he actually was. A man who had run out of road. Judge Stanton delivered the sentence 2 weeks later. She spoke for 11 minutes before announcing it. Her words were precise and deliberate. You were given a badge and a duty to protect. Instead, you used that badge as a weapon. You targeted citizens based on the color of their skin. You stole from people who had no power to stop you. You planted evidence to cover your crimes. And when those people found the courage to complain, the system you served buried their voices. This court will not bury them again. 15 years. Federal prison. No parole eligibility for 10. Full restitution to all identified victims, $412,000. Permanent ban from law enforcement in any capacity, in any state, for life. Braddock was escorted from the courtroom in handcuffs. He didn't look at anyone. The doors closed behind him with a sound that every person in that room would remember. But it didn't stop there. Captain Elaine Crawford was charged separately. Obstruction of justice, dereliction of duty, failure to investigate complaints involving a pattern of criminal conduct. She was fired, stripped of her pension, and faced up to 5 years. Her trial was scheduled for the following spring. Hensley pleaded guilty to accessory charges. He received 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent separation from law enforcement. He left the state within a month. The county was forced to overhaul everything. Mandatory body cameras with tamper-proof systems. If the camera goes off, the stop doesn't count. An independent civilian review board with subpoena power. No more complaints disappearing into a captain's desk drawer. Mandatory racial bias training. Quarterly audits of all traffic stop data published publicly. Faith Young was profiled in national media. The Washington Herald ran a front-page feature. Cable news called her office for weeks. Interview requests stacked up like paperwork. She declined almost all of them. She gave one statement, and it was the only one she needed. I had the tools and the title to fight back. Most people Braddock stopped didn't. That's not justice. That's luck. And no one's safety should depend on luck. 6 months later, Faith drove the same road. Route 9, 2 lanes, flat fields on both sides. The same stretch of asphalt where Braddock had pulled her over on that Tuesday evening. The same gravel shoulder where she'd knelt to pick up her belongings. But it was different now. The speed trap was gone. No cruiser parked behind the tree line. No flashing lights waiting for the next target. A new sign stood at the county line. Small, official, easy to miss if you weren't looking. It read, "Body cameras required for all traffic stops in this jurisdiction." Faith slowed down as she passed it, just for a second. Then she kept driving. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Mom. She picked up on speaker. "Hey, Mama. Hey, baby. You on your way?" About 20 minutes out. Tanya was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that holds 22 years of weight. "Faith?" "Yeah, Mama?" "I read the article, the one in the Herald. Terrence sent it to me." "I told him not to do that." "I'm glad he did." Another pause, longer this time. "I wish someone had done that for me. Back then. I wish someone had cared enough to do what you did." Faith gripped the steering wheel. Her eyes stung. She blinked it away. "That's why I did it, Mama. That's the whole reason." She heard her mother breathe. Soft. Steady. The sound of a woman who had carried something heavy for a very long time, and was finally, not putting it down, but realizing she didn't have to carry it alone. "Come home safe, baby." "I will." She hung up, drove the rest of the way in silence. The fields rolled past. The sky was wide and orange at the edges. She thought about Darnell Wilkins. He'd received his restitution check 2 weeks ago. He called Faith's office to say thank you. His daughter was back in school, full tuition paid. He said he finally slept through the night for the first time in 3 years. She thought about the 30 other victims. 14 had received checks so far. The rest were being processed. Some of them had moved out of the county. Some of them had moved out of the state. But all of them had been contacted. All of them had been told the same thing. Someone heard you. She thought about Hensley, gone, left the state, working at a hardware store somewhere in the Midwest. A man who spent years choosing silence, now living in it. She thought about Crawford, awaiting trial, stripped of her badge, her title, her pension, sitting in her living room, watching the career she'd built collapse because she decided that filing a complaint into a drawer was easier than doing her job. She thought about Braddock, cell block D, federal facility, 15 years. No badge, no road, no power, just a man in a concrete room with nothing but time and the memory of every person he'd robbed. And she thought about the Civilian Review Board, already operational. 3 complaints investigated in its first month, more than Crawford had acted on in 3 years. Faith pulled into her mother's driveway. The porch light was on. Tanya stood at the door, arms folded, the way she always stood when she was waiting. Faith grabbed the gift from the passenger seat, a new envelope. $300, same amount, same purpose. Just a daughter buying her mother a birthday present. She walked up the steps. Tanya hugged her, held on a beat longer than usual. Happy birthday, Mama. Thank you, baby. They went inside. The door closed. The porch light stayed on. And on Route 9, a car drove past the county line. A black woman behind the wheel. No flashing lights followed her. No one pulled her over. No one asked where she came from. She just drove, the way everyone should be able to. Nah, man. Imagine that's you, on your knees, picking up your own stuff, while some dude with a badge laughs in your face. 10 years he did this. 10 years. Tell me, what would you have done?